Welcome to the channel. And today I have the ultimate hookup for you. I have a man that I have so much respect for, and I work with the SAP Foundation in Fetola. He is the man that got me started with this training in these workshops, and I've learned so much from him. I have 30 minutes to get all the insight in the world from a man I believe I need an hour to get all the good stuff from, and his name is Anton Ressel. Welcome.
Thanks, Ntanda. You're
Good
very
to have
glad.
you.
At last,
At
we have this
last.
conversation. It's been a while coming. Yeah.
You owe me fishing.
I owe you fishing, and I also owe you a longer conversation next time.
Mm.
But sadly, I've got other commitments today, so we'll have to try and be as concise as we can.
Now we can be. There's an answer you gave yesterday to this question. What qualifies you to teach small businesses? It was.
You've heard it before, I think, and I say it often, and I mean it though. It's really because I've made many of the mistakes as an entrepreneur in my own journey that I guess are quite common, and that I would like to try and help others avoid if they can. Some of those mistakes are quite costly and time consuming, and I feel qualified to teach people because I've learned the hard way.
There's a thing that people normally say about mistakes, and it's you can make mistakes and walk away having not learned. And that's how people repeat the mistakes. How do you know on your side that you made the mistakes, but you learned enough from them that you have value to give? Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's how hard have you hit your head? I think for me, there's a saying that if you fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And it's kind of the same for mistakes. It's like everyone makes errors. We, underquote, or we take on an order that we shouldn't have and put ourselves under pressure, or we, don't manage our staff properly, or whatever it may be. It's part of the journey of entrepreneurship. But I think it is those entrepreneurs who genuinely take it on board and go, you know what? I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to try it different. That are generally the ones that I see that get ahead in it. It's there's another saying that I like, and you'll probably hear a lot of sayings from me today. But you ultimately, there's no greater teacher than failure. It's a bit of a cliche and it sounds a bit sad. And when people hear it, they're like, oh, I'd rather not go down that road. Why do I have to fail to learn? But the truth is, when things are going well and you're winning and you're styling, you're not learning. You're doing okay, but it's only when there's a bit of a a bump in the road, or some kind of serious hurdle to overcome, that there's true learning. I feel certainly been the case in my journey.
When I hear your story and how you were saying it yesterday, that's the one thing that stood out for me. I wanted to get your take on mistakes and failure. What's the big one or two that stand out for you in your personal journey? And then we'll get to the lessons that people can apply when they face challenges in their own businesses.
I think one of my big mistakes in my entrepreneurial journey was thinking that I needed to go from 0 to 100 and be comfortable to go from 0 to 10 to 20 to 30. And by way of example, when I had a manufacturing business many years ago, quite fast, and I felt like the pinnacle of success for me was to get Woolworths as a client. And I chased them aggressively, and I knocked on the door and the door was closed for a long time, and eventually they opened the door for me, and I managed to secure an order, and that order almost killed my business. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I made, is that I felt like organic growth wasn't good enough for me. I needed to go fast. 10x and fast. And the problem with going fast is that if your systems are not solid, you put them under major pressure with that kind of volume. So suddenly from making, 50 or 100 units of a style, we know how to make 5,000 to 10,000 units of a style with the same team, the same infrastructure, the same systems, the same cash flow. And that was probably one of my biggest lessons.
What part of your systems got exposed with that?
Well, just general production capacity. So what happened was we now had one massive client that was eating up all our capacity. So we couldn't service all our other clients. So those people who'd been faithful and loyal to us for years, they're ordering 50 here and 100 there of a product, and consistent, loyal customers suddenly got put on the back, and they felt it, and some of them even left, or at the very least were very unhappy with us. So that was probably the biggest area that got strained. And then cash flow. When you're dealing with the likes of a Woolworths, although I did manage to eventually negotiate 7-day payment terms with them. I think I was the only business company in South Africa at that time with those terms. But I played the violin for them. I gave them a sob story and job creation and all that stuff just so that I could get those payment terms. But before that, it was 30 days, 60 days, and we didn't have the cash reserves to make that happen.
Okay. When you say you played the violin, though, and our advice for someone who wants to work with corporate and negotiate those terms, what sort of advice do you have?
If you don't ask, you don't get.
True.
And we all assume that it's corporates or even any client, any customer. At the end of the day, if you're selling a product or service, it's a mutual exchange of value. So no one's doing you a favor by giving you an order. They need your product or service. So that's the first thing people need to remember. And the second thing is, it's not really the norm for people to dictate to you what your payment term should be.
But as more people will say, I don't have the power when I walk into the room.
But you've got a mouth and you can ask. And, the truth is, quite often, the bigger guys, the big retailers, the big corporates, at the end of the day, you're still dealing with people.
Yeah.
They've got a job to do. They've got a responsibility. They want to get product on the shelf. They want a reliable supplier, or if it's a service, the same thing. And if you're honest and authentic, I find that often you get surprised by the results. If you get a contract or a tender or whatever it might be, and you say to them, listen, I'm really delighted. I'm going to blow you away. I'm absolutely give my all to deliver on this contract. But the cash flow is a challenge for me. Is there anything you can do regarding payment terms? I see it's currently 60 days. Could we maybe look at 30 days? And you'd be surprised how often people are willing to have a conversation. And I think we're just too afraid. It's like we treat business like we treat going to the doctor. We don't ask the questions. We just get told the information.
And you get given the terms. Interesting. There is one mistake though that you've mentioned before that I can't not ask about, and it's about exporting. Still has to do with the growth, but you had a nasty experience with exporting.
Sure. I mean, we made a product, just for context, we were a beadwork and wire art manufacturing business that grew very big, 120 staff. And at one point we were exporting to 26 countries, and hadn't really done the homework sufficiently around customs requirements and regulations. And we exported an order we used to make these township radios, wire art radio, made out of wire. They had a Coca-Cola. Some of your listeners and viewers might know them, remember them. They had like a Coca-Cola dial, and they were quite fun and funky. My one partner was actually the designer of those. And we sent a huge consignment of them to Germany. It was our biggest export order ever. It was about $500,000, which 15, 20 years ago, it was a hell of a lot of money. And they got held up in customs because we didn't have permission from Coca-Cola, a letter. The Germans can be quite pedantic and particular, and to the letter, giving us permission to use their logo on our radios. And I mean, we've been using it for years with no issues domestically and sending it around the world. And that order almost got cancelled. And that would have potentially wiped. business. It was a huge amount of money for us at the time. It was cash flow that we needed. Fortunately, I had an artist who'd worked for me and was living in Germany at the time, and we actually flew him into the customs to the port, and he removed all the Coca-Cola branding and he replaced it just with plain silver generic branding. And they were happy with that, and our client was fortunately happy with that. So we managed to salvage.
Did it not wipe out your margins?
It did affect our margins heavily. We had to discount the order for the client as well because it wasn't what they'd originally ordered. And I think the big lesson for me there was do your homework, because mistakes with export are much more costly than domestic. Mm-hmm. If you have a order mess up, or if you offering a service and something goes wrong in another province, you can fly down and fix it. You know, when it's in Germany or across the world, it's not so easy. So just make sure that you get your ducks in a row and you understand.
Yeah, and for many small business owners out there, you might not have a friend in Germany.
Yeah, exactly. No, if we hadn't had a friend in Germany, sure. No, what I would have done, I probably would have had even more gray hairs than I do now.
What do you think is the biggest turning point of your career? One or two events, moments that made you this man that we see and respect so much?
Well, thank you. I think for me, the realization that what I learned, the most valuable lessons I learned from other people. And quite often unexpected sources. Okay. So people just generously giving their knowledge and their wisdom to me was a big part of my journey. And then I guess also just the realization that I do love to teach. Although, ironically, a good coach or mentor shouldn't necessarily be teaching. We should be guiding and facilitating and helping people uncover their own power. I find that sharing what I've learned and helping others potentially fast track their journeys is inspiring for me. From a turning point perspective, I think one of the most useful turning points in my entrepreneurial career was when I went overseas. I went to Holland and presented our products to a group of Dutch buyers who are notoriously hardcore. Okay, the Dutch have been trading for generations. They came to the Cape in 1652 or whatever. And they know their stuff. They know how to negotiate. And our product was very much a sort of a socially aligned product. Locally, we leveraged heavily on the fact that we employed 120 people. We were creating all these jobs and taking artists off the street and employing them permanently. So we had a strong social message, which resonated domestically. You know, people gave us opportunities because of our brand positioning. Whereas there, I gave them my whole spiel. I did this presentation, my pitch and everything, and job creation. And I'll never forget this one guy with this like stony face, just serious Dutch buyer face. It was like, it's very nice that your products help create jobs for people in Africa, but your pricing is way out, your packaging sucks, and the product's actually very average.
Those words.
And I was like, I was wounded. I didn't know what to say. For one of the few times in my life, I was speechless. But it was the most valuable thing because it made me realize that at the end of the day, you've got to deliver A, what the market needs and wants, and B, don't believe your own hype. You know, we see it locally here with people winning awards and stuff all the time. There's 1,000,001 entrepreneurial awards. There's the Western Cape Premier Awards. There's all of these things. You get put into magazines because we're so desperate, I think, as a country for good news.
Yeah.
So we show pony people when they're not actually ready or justified of that position. And I guess the learning would be, don't believe your own, rather just keep it real.
Interesting. That can be crippling though. The feedback that you got. I know many entrepreneurs who could hear that and quit. What do you think is the difference in mindset?
I heard it and I came back and I worked my team into shape and I said, we can no longer just rest on our laurels that we're creating jobs. It's not enough. We've got to improve our product. We've got to make our product's got to stand on its own. And the fact that we are a socially minded social enterprise is the cherry on the cake. It's not the cake. That was the biggest thing for me. So then we improved our systems, we improved our production quality, we improved our packaging, and we got our pricing. And even though I never ended up supplying those Dutch guys, very valuable bit of feedback for me. It popped my balloon at the time, big time. But when I reflected on it, came back, those are the kind of things one needs to hear. You know, if everyone's telling you how fantastic you are all the time,
Ignore your blind spots.
correct.
That's beautiful. So what advice do you have for these guys that have heard this negative feedback and quit? Because maybe emotionally, do you think it's a self-esteem thing?
I think it
Or
is.
just
And
fear?
I think it is. And I think a lot of us probably suffer already from imposter syndrome. You know, like maybe our parents weren't entrepreneurs or we haven't had any exposure to that in our lives. And like, what am I doing in business? And then when someone critiques what we do, we take it personally. And I guess my advice would be, and it's difficult, I know, try and look at it objectively from whence it comes. And B, every bit of constructive criticism or negative feedback is an opportunity to improve. And if you can frame it that way, and I've seen people who welcome it, they say, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Don't say, tell me what I'm doing. And that's the kind of attitude I think one needs as an entrepreneur.
To look for the feedback.
Look for the feedback and don't shy away from it. And try not to take it personally. At the end of the day, it's just business. If someone says to you, hey, Ntando or whoever, you know, you didn't do a great job there, or I wasn't happy, or the client wasn't happy, or we didn't think it was really on point, take it on the chin and how can I do it better? And people normally will respond to that and go, okay, well, thanks. Now that you asked, actually, what you need to do is X, Y, and Z.
And that's where the good value comes from, actually, most of the time.
Totally.
That's beautiful. Let me flip it to the mentor side. You are also a mentor. And the mentor to mentors, what other advice do you have for mentors when it comes to coaching or helping a client who feels that way? And so let's say a client comes, you can see the branding sucks, the product sucks, and you want to give them the feedback, but you're afraid that their feelings, they might quit.
Yeah.
So the advice you want to give or the guidance you want to give might have the opposite effect to what your intention is.
I think what I've learned over the years, situations like that, is the very first thing we need to do as coaches and mentors is we need to build trust. So if we can find a way to establish trust up front, immediately, you can trust me, I'm here to help you, I have no other agenda, then that kind of harsh stuff and maybe negative feedback is usually received in a very different spirit. If you just go in immediately guns blazing, you're never going to get that. You're going to get defensiveness, or they're going to nod, yeah, and meanwhile in their head they're thinking, what an idiot this guy is. So I really focus on building trust first, and it's usually about the first 1 or 2 sessions that I have with a
How does it go?
Yeah, you just learn about each other. Tell me about yourself. What inspires you? How did you start the business? What? Tell me about your family. And not because you trying to psychologize or
2 ways.
for
Tell
sure
me about your family.
For sure.
Tell me about mine. And
I'll be quite open and upfront in the coaching and mentoring conversations that I have. It's not fair of me to expect you to bear your soul, willing to say anything about it. So I will be upfront. I'll talk about my kids. I'll talk about my family. I was married for 23 years and then divorced.
That's a tough one for some mentors, though, because they feel like exposing your weaknesses diminishes your credibility.
That's a good point. And I've found the opposite. Actually, ironically, the opposite is usually true. Showing your humanity strengthens your power. And it actually strengthens your ability to get buy-in and come from the people that you are there to serve. And another thing I always try and do, and I mentioned this yesterday in a session I had with Fatola mentors, is try and show up empty to these sessions that you, in other words, without preconceived idea. Oh, this business is in whatever logistics, so therefore the person's probably like this, and they're probably like that, and they probably want to know these kind of questions. I try and show up like a blank page, and I find that works for me because they're not carrying my own baggage into the conversation.
And just give the entrepreneur a chance to share what their goals are.
Yes, absolutely.
Unhinged.
Without trying to impose what I think they should be.
Okay. I think we can cap it off with 1 or 2 success stories that you can think of that stand out for you, clients that you're proud of. And it doesn't have to be someone who made big numbers, just someone that made you proud, that you work with.
Sure, there's been a lot.
I know there's thousands by now.
I think when I know that I've succeeded is when it's 10 or 15 done, and I bump into someone or they message me out of the blue and say, Anton, I just wanted to let you know I got this huge contract, or it was something you said all those years ago that sort of stuck with me. And there's a couple. There's one lady named Paula from Limpopo who was very resilient, and just when she initially came to me, she couldn't focus. She was all over the place, grabbing opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
One of those sort of, almost like tender chasing business.
Yeah.
And what we worked on was getting focus and to specialize in a certain specific niche and that niche. And she did, and has really changed her entire life as a result. So that was, getting someone to really own their focus and own their, I suppose, first of all, what inspires you, and then follow that through. That was a really good one. And then I'm currently working with a guy who has the potential to make a massive impact on blindness. He's a surgeon. He's a brilliant guy. He's juggling multiple balls, and my work with him is around managing the pressure and stress of potentially building $100 million business and managing family life and juggling all of that. So I think what we as coaches do, we help people focus and prioritize and keep their eye on the vision goal. If we do that consistently and well, we're doing our jobs.
And that's great. There's something that sticks out with Paula example. When you are helping someone to focus, how do you go around saying this is what you should focus on, and they've got 5 things on their plate? Because part of what causes them to do the 5 things is the anxiety of what if that one does it, that one doesn't.
Yeah. And
now you're coming to say, let's focus on these 1 or 2. And there's always the risk that you could be wrong.
That's true. And I would seldom go like, I think you should focus on landscaping, for example, instead of whatever, engineering or whatever it might. It's more a case of understanding what inspires. What does she feel energetic and energized doing? What does she lie awake at thinking about improving? Where does her passion? And when you can connect people with, it's not always possible that your passion becomes your career, but if you can combine what inspires you at a broad level with the work that you do, that's when, in her case, she kind of knew, but she was too afraid to commit. You say she was keeping her options open, trying all sorts of different things, and keeping one of them with. But it's a little bit like putting on a blindfold, throwing a board at the dart at the dartboard, hoping that it hits the bulls. I would rather help people take the blindfold off and make a careful the dartboard, because they know what they're trying to hit.
It's a beautiful example. Okay.
I just made it up.
I think one selfish one from my side. I've never been able to answer this well, so I know I'll get a good answer today. How do you, when people ask about these clients that we work with, a lot of the clients that do well, and we know that we've done a good job, go and do much, much better than us.
Isn't that annoying?
It
It's
is.
like you want to cut to that, give me a piece, dude.
And someone makes 10 times what you're making, and you're helping them to get there. How do you balance that part out? And if someone is asking, how do you guys feel about this? Because a lot of the people that you help end up doing much better than you in some instances.
And it's because of you, often. I'm personally quite comfortable with that. I've thought in the past, should I say to them, listen, commission, thanks. But at the end of the day, that's our job, isn't it? It's to help people achieve the very best success they can and be the best version of themselves. And I kind of feel like that will come back to me in other ways. They'll tell other people, listen, I made it because of Anton. There was something that he did or something that he said that was the changing point for me. And the universe will reward you in other ways. I'm a firm believer in that. And celebrate their success and potentially feel a little bit annoyed that it's not your success. I haven't really answered you, but
actually you did.
It's a difficult question, but yeah, I feel that warm, happy feeling when someone comes back to me a few years later and says, I've just bought my 3rd holiday house in Umhlanga.
And you're looking for your first and wondering,
exactly.
10 years, 5 years.
Yeah, correct. But that's because we teach and they do. There's something in that.
We teach and they do. That sounds scary though for us.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you. Thank you for the 30 minutes.
Thank you, man. Anytime, man. I love your work.
And you still do owe us a long interview. And I
Absolutely.
know people listening and watching will want that long interview. It's coming. He promised.
Promise.
My fishing trip is coming on the side. What's the deal with fishing, by the way? What does it do for you?
I think it keeps me grounded. It's an opportunity to just focus on what I'm doing. Think about anything else. So it's almost like therapy for me. Plus, I love nature and the outdoors. Whether it's fishing or swimming or surfing or hiking or anything of that nature, that's where I re-energize. The work that we do can be quite challenging. We listen to a lot of people's problems. We have to try and help people navigate difficult stuff. And one needs a means of switching off. And for me, that's big.
That's what it does. Okay. Guess I'll experience it firsthand.
You definitely will.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us as well. If you enjoyed the content, if you stuck around with us for this long, you will want to hit that subscribe button, that like button. So when he does come back, you get to get that alert in your email. Thank you. And thank you for supporting the channel.
This one, guys.